Welcome again to another edition of the Twins Wrap with the television play-by-play voice, Dick Bremer. Derek Hansen with you. And I guess, Dick, I hate to start off negative, but really it's the A topic, I think, for Twins fans is the all-star snubs. Eddie Rosario, Max Kepler, a lot of people feeling they should get in, but it is good news that Jake Odorizzi and Jorge Polanco are going to be, at least certainly with Polanco being a starter, that is the good news.
Yeah, I think Twins fans everywhere have every right to be disappointed. I know I'm disappointed. I've always looked forward to the All-Star game. I'm a fan of the game. I've gone to a number of them when possible, and I've always looked at the All-Star game with two different lenses. One, it should be the best players in the game, but given that every team needs to be represented, and I am an advocate of that as well, I look forward to the best teams being well represented. And in this case, Major League Baseball blew it. The Twins have been one of the best teams. I thought minimum 4 players for them this year. There's a chance another player or two might be added. But I really think that baseball shortchanged Twins territory. This has been a great team. It's a team that hopefully will be playing in October. And if I'm a baseball fan in Tennessee and I've heard about the Twins and I've heard about Eddie Rosario for a few years and I want to see him in the All-Star game and see what he's like, I'm going to be disappointed too. I just thought it was really a very poor oversight by Major League Baseball.
Yeah, it's interesting because we had a time there where Cal Ripken Jr. wasn't maybe as good as some shortstops out there in the American League, but as far as all stars, I mean, he was one of the biggest stars in baseball. So there's that balance of it too, isn't there?
Yeah, and the one I pointed out on the air right after we found out that, I guess it was in the middle of our rain delay in Chicago, that the Twins had just 2 players and the Astros had 6. Well, then you look at the 6 players that Houston had picked, and Garrett Cole is a tremendous pitcher, and he's an all-star caliber pitcher. But you put his numbers up against Jose Barrios, and Barrios has been better in every category except strikeouts. And so, if you wanted to balance things out a little bit and make the optics of all this look a whole lot better, at least in the upper Midwest, Barrios probably should have been the pick instead of Garrett Cole.
Let's talk a little bit about Eddie Rosario. Even if he was named the All-Star game, who knows if he could have played. And hey, I'm kind of transitioning into the talk of, that little injury bug thing. It keeps popping up with different players at times. Hopefully by the time we get done with the All-Star break, all these things will go away and they can get this out of their system.
Well, that or as the injuries come up, as they almost inevitably will, that they're of a short-term nature. The Twins have had wrists, ankles, things like that, but they have all been of in a short-term scenario in terms of getting the players back quickly. They haven't had an oblique that's going to put somebody out for 6 weeks. Tim Anderson of the White Sox suffered a high ankle sprain. About the time Eddie Rosario suffered his ankle sprain, Anderson's going to be out 4 to 6 weeks, and we hope that's not the case with Rosario. So, yeah, injuries are going to happen. We know that, and the Twins, frankly, have been pretty fortunate in the first half, not having any lingering ones. I think their longest one was Nelson Cruz missing 3 weeks with his wrist. So if that's the case, then I think this Twins team will continue to do well in the second half.
As far as that's concerned, I think we're kind of seeing this a little bit, and hopefully on a more consistent basis. This team, when one guy was maybe slumping, like I think it was Max Kepler slumped on a road trip, but everyone else picked him up, and that's usually the good formula for success if you're going to be a good and division-leading team.
Yeah, it's been fun to watch because when healthy, this is one of the, well, I'll go ahead and say it, this has been the deepest lineup the Twins have ever had. That explains all the home runs, all the runs scored, and all that. And when they're all healthy, this is a really, really productive lineup and something that can overcome the few games they've had this year where the pitching hasn't been so good. So we'll see how it all plays out in the second half. I'll be particularly interested to see how the team plays, not so much whether they win or lose because Oakland's playing awfully well, but how this team plays after the All-Star snub. I don't think this is a bunch that needs to have a fire lit under them, but my goodness, if that doesn't refocus you a little bit as to how what statements you want to make in the game. Getting just 2 All-Stars picked might just do that for this bunch.
That is a good point, because I look back to a couple years ago when this team had a bad West Coast swing and the Twins went from buyers to sellers in a quick hurry, and that motivated this clubhouse. I joked with Thad Levine. I said, was it you or Derek that was the poster there taking the pieces of clothing off like in Major League? But that really did inspire them. So stuff like that can really fire up a clubhouse.
Well, this is a pretty close-knit group to begin with, and I think as you congratulate Odorizzi for making the team and Polanco for making the team, they're going to look across the clubhouse, and there's going to be a lot of that when they reconvene today. And although they all knew the news Sunday before the game in Chicago, you know what? It's kind of a band of brothers type thing, and that guy should have made it, and that guy should have made it, and we're going to show them. Again, this bunch doesn't need that because they certainly played awfully well without that. But if there's a renewed focus at a time in the year when sometimes that can be a benefit to a team, well, they've got it now, because I think they, to a man, all feel that they should have been much better represented in the All-Star game.
The Twins wrap with the television voice of the Minnesota Twins, Dick Bremer, brought to you by Jefferson Lines. Dick, let's talk a little bit about, we mentioned this last week. We're coming into the All-Star break. Right now, as we speak before tonight's game, the Twins are 8 games ahead of Cleveland. It's amazing to think about. If we would have said this, back in March, it would have been, we'd have been just goo-goo gaga over it. But, they've stumbled a little bit. It's funny how it's all really kind of relative to what you've seen lately.
Well, the Twins had a good June. I think the perception is they did not, because they didn't play quite as well as they did in May. And the lead has shrunk a little bit from, 11.5 to 8 games. But people need to understand how well the Cleveland Indians played. The Indians, I think, ended up June with the best record in the American League, and they were only able to pick up 3.5 games. If the Twins had had a difficult month of June, this race would be a whole lot tighter right now. The fact is, it's got to be a little frustrating for Cleveland. They played their tails off, and they only picked up 3.5 games over the course of the month. So we'll see how well Cleveland goes. The question all along has been, can this Twins team sustain its success? And now within that, I think we all honestly need to look at the Cleveland Indians and wonder if they can sustain their success and whether they can continue to play in July the way they did in June. I wouldn't be surprised if they did, because that's the nature of a Terry Francona team. But they've got a long road ahead of them with 8 games, as long as this Twins team continues to play good baseball.
Yeah, who would have thunk the Baltimore Orioles would help out the Twins the way they did over the weekend, taking 2 of 3 with 2 dominating scores on Friday and Saturday?
Well, the Indians went to Baltimore, and the Twins in 6 games scored 45 runs and hit 23 home runs, I believe, in the 6 games against Baltimore. The Indians went to Baltimore in a 3-game series and scored 2 runs, and were lucky to get out of there with the 1 win they got. So there's some issues in Cleveland that just won't go away.
All right, Dick, I'll call you right back. Part 2 of the Twins Wrap, brought to you by Jefferson Lines, on the way. Jefferson Lines, your #1 bus experience for over 100 years, serving North Dakota and cities through the Midwest. Derek Hansen with you, along with the TV voice of the Minnesota Twins. We'll be back after the CBS News Roundup and also the KFGO News Report from Jim Monk. Jack Sunday will be back to wrap things up here in the Drive Time News on the mighty 790 KFGO. Couch Potato Radio, Derek Hansen with you here on the mighty 790 KFGO. And also, it's the Twins Wrap, Part 2 with Dick Bremer, the television voice of the Minnesota Twins. Twins in action, starting a 3-game series against the Oakland A's. It's brought to you by Jefferson Lines, your #1 bus experience for over 100 years, serving North Dakota and cities throughout the Midwest. Let's talk a little bit about a guy that we touched on last week, and the fact that Miguel Sano. And I think for a lot of us, and I'll be honest with you, until I talked with you last Tuesday, I was thinking, man, maybe he needs to go on the bus in Rochester for a while. But you said power hitters like that, they just got to start seeing the ball more and swing through it. And he's still going to have his strikeouts, but he showed over this past weekend why he's in that lineup every day.
Yeah, I really hope for Miguel that he can have a series like he had in Chicago or a series like he had in Kansas City on the last road trip, if he can have one of those at home, I think he really would get. It would be a big step forward for him in terms of his confidence. The damage that he's done has been done almost all on the road, and if he's someone who wants to do really, really well in front of the home crowd, he's not the first player who would want to do that. Whether he puts more pressure on himself when he's home, he wouldn't be the first player to do that either. But if he could just relax and put the swings on the ball that he did in Chicago and in Kansas City before that, well, then I think he would relax, be a much more confident player, and then the Twins would be able to have him be a big contributor. As it is right now, I expect he'll probably have a good series here in Oakland, and then we'll hope for a nice series when we get back home as well.
Yeah, Oakland, usually is a pretty good spot for hitters to figure that out. And a guy you and I talk about quite a bit, Byron Buxton, coming back now healthy. I'm looking for him to really crank it up now here in the West Coast. What do you think about that?
Well, he had to miss some time when he got hit by the pitch, and Byron probably isn't one of those players that can miss time, step back in, and be productive. And it seemed like it took him a couple games to get his swing, but then he got the double in Chicago on Sunday, and he just looks like he's ready to go. And he, as you look at potential playoff teams, and let's put the Twins in there for right now, and then you put them in a group with the Yankees and the Astros and whoever else might come out of the wild card, maybe even Cleveland. There are a lot of great lineups out there, but what Byron can bring to the lineup is a difference maker. If he can continue to play well in the second half and stay healthy, you got to remember he missed most of that wild card game a couple of years ago with a concussion. He can be a difference maker in a game or a series come October.
Let's focus on pitching. We mentioned that Jake Odorizzi is going to be on the All-Star team, so we know what he's done the first half, and Jose Barrios is pretty steady. But, you look at Kyle Gibson, who misses, more or less kind of missed a start. I guess they're just backing him up after being in that 18-inning game. But I tell you, they're pretty solid. If Michael Pineda is going to pitch like that, that really has to make you feel good, and maybe you don't worry about going out and getting a starter like so many people have been saying.
Yeah, there'll be some activity. There'll be much more discussion than activity. But Twins fans need to think of this regarding additions to the rotation. If you add, let's go to the top of the list and go with Madison Bumgarner. If you were to add a Madison Bumgarner, he's in your rotation. Who currently in the rotation would be able to be moved to the bullpen and be an asset? And for one reason or another, I don't know that the candidates are very, I don't know that there's one really. Would you want to put Pineda in the bullpen? I don't know that that would be fair to him. He's recovering from Tommy John surgery. Martin Perez was in the bullpen at the start of the year and didn't really look nearly as good as a reliever as he has done as a starter. So I don't know that he would be a candidate to be moved to the bullpen and pitch effectively there. So those are all the things that Derek Falvey and Thad Levine are looking at, and I still believe, and I think we've talked about this before, if there's a pitching move to be made, and I suspect there will be, it'll be come out of the bullpen. Whether it's a closer, a seventh or eighth inning guy, I don't know. But that, to me, is where the need is, maybe made even greater with the fact that there isn't a starter who could be moved to the bullpen and suddenly become a reliable seventh, eighth, or ninth inning guy.
Let's talk a little bit with Odorizzi going tonight, too, which is always a good thing. You mentioned the fact that the Oakland A's they're a good, pesky team, 46-39 on this year. This is not going to be an easy series whatsoever. They're quietly a pretty good team.
They're right now playing better than anybody else in the American League. They've had kind of a double whammy. Their best starter's been suspended for PED use. Blake Trinan, their closer, may come back in this series. He's had some shoulder discomfort, and yet they just keep on playing. I mean, everything we said about Terry Francona and the Indians, you can say about Bob Melvin and the A's. They find a way to get better, usually, in the second half of the year. And so, Bud Grant was the most famous coach who said it's not who you play, but when you play them. And this right now is not a real good time to be playing the Oakland A's because they're at the top of their game.
No, that's very true. We've talked before about Tampa Bay and this Montreal thing going back and forth, and Oakland has been in flux with that ballpark for a long time, but they're finally figuring out that a little bit, aren't they? I mean, it's been such a tough thing for what has been a historically good organization as far as success over certainly throughout my lifetime, but it'll be nice to finally get that all tied up.
Yeah, I think the sense in baseball is that the A's are closer to a new ballpark than the Rays are. They both have, uh, very strong needs to get into a new facility. The place here is terrible. It wasn't up to major league standards 20 years ago, and major league standards have increased obviously with the addition of all these new ballparks. So the hope is, I think, for everybody in baseball that somehow they can find a solution here and in the Tampa St. Pete area. But I think there's a little more optimism that eventually they'll get something done here. Now, all that said, as we all know in the upper Midwest, you can have all the stadium designs and finance plans you want, but until you get something actually approved, secured and put in concrete, literally in concrete, then you really don't have anything. So we'll be curious what happens here in the next couple of years. I don't think anybody's holding out much hope anymore that Tampa St. Pete can hang on to the team. So relocation seems pretty likely there, I would think.
Final thing for you. I hate for it to be so negative, but everyone seems to know each other in Major League Baseball. So I'm sure the sad news of the Angels pitcher Tyler Skaggs dying at 27. I think we look at this, and I'm a stepfather of someone in their 20s too. I just can't imagine. I think it hits on just a personal, professional level, and certainly is shaking Major League Baseball.
Yeah, and the Angels have had to deal with it far too often. Those of us old enough to remember, Lyman Bostock 41 years ago in the prime of his playing career, Nick Adenhart 10 years ago, and now this. When someone that young passes, it's always tragic. But we have this image, I think, of professional athletes, being in peak health and being the model for what we all physically would like to be, a well-trained athlete and all that. And when you have an in-uniform player suddenly pass like this, it happened years ago with, Darryl Kyle of the Cardinals. It really shakes everybody because it is, as you said, a community, a family. C.J. Crone of the Twins was a teammate of Tyler Skaggs for a number of years with the Angels. And it really does shake people. Those of us who follow the game, who are twice that age or more, I mean, it still gives us the shakes because it's a terrible thing when it happens. The Angels find themselves in a grieving frame of mind again with the loss of somebody who was in his physical prime, and it's going to be a somber mood in the Twins clubhouse today, and it's really, really sad because, it is a community. I got to know Tyler Skaggs just a little bit. I had a brief conversation with him. I won't pretend that I got to know him, but when we were at Target Field, when the Angels came, they had the Vikings take some batting practice before an Angels game. And Tyler Skaggs just happens to be a great Viking fan. So he had pitched, I think, the night before, and he was out, with his eyes wide open watching, Cousins and some of the other, Vikings take a batting practice. And so I talked to him and asked him why he was a Viking fan. And it was just a big deal for him. You could see in his eyes the adulation that fans who came to watch him pitch must have had. So, yeah, it's a really, really sad time for baseball.
Yeah, just a shocking 27 years old. Oh, just my heart breaks for him and his family and a young wife, too. Recently, a newlywed, too. It's so just tragic, that is for sure. Well, Dick, late night tonight, I will say I don't like these West Coast games, but many times I'll be laying in bed and falling asleep to you talking to me. But hopefully I can stay up for it.
If there's a compliment in there somewhere, I'll take it.
But it is a lot of fun. Who are you working with this week?
I got Bert out here on the West Coast
nice.
again, and frankly, I don't know who it is when we get back home. So
yeah, well, Bert's always a lot of fun. You're enjoying this kind of potpourri because I kind of do. We all love Bert, but it's been fun to hear some analysis from other folks too.
Yeah, it's been different, because it wasn't that long ago. Bert and I did all the games, but now we're kind of rotating the former players through the analyst chair. And, I can adapt to just about anything, but all that really matters is whether the viewers like it. And I think the positive feedback has far outweighed the negative feedback. So we might see this type of rotation, for a while. It's as I've told people when I was a bachelor, I didn't date around much, but it must have been something like this because I'm with somebody different every week.
That's pretty good. Dick, thanks so much for your time. We'll talk to you again next week. And I guess full disclosure here, we'll probably talk to you Sunday on Couch Potato Radio and get you ready for the All-Star game Tuesday for our big Twins wrap.
That sounds good.
Dick Bremer and the Twins wrap, again, brought to you by Jefferson Lines, your #1 bus experience for over 100 years, serving North Dakota and cities through the Midwest. Couch Potato Radio, Derek Hansen with you, with just wrapping up part 2 with Dick Bremer. Your phone calls at 237-5948, 1-800-880-5346. You can always text us, 35270. We'll talk more Twins if you like. We'll get to a few other things. We're here until 8 o'clock, and then Bob Harrison Nighttime Live takes over right here on the mighty 790 KFGO.